Okay, so as far as um, forensic photography is concerned, there's no, unlike what you might see on television and things like CSI, there's no job specifically for forensic photography. The photography is part of a larger forensics training program. In Canada, the people who investigate crime scenes are not called CSIs, they're called FIOs. They're called Forensic Identification Officer. And there's only two places, um, well, I shouldn't say only two places, but the two main places where you get this training are here at the Ontario Police College in Aylmer, or you go to Ottawa to the Canadian Police College. And the basic training is, depending on which place you go, here where I am, it's 10 weeks long. At the Canadian Police College, I think it's 8 weeks. We tend to do more practical exercises than they do, and that's what makes our program a little bit longer in time. The photography portion, they are given 2 weeks straight of the 10 weeks of camera theory, and then they get some practical exercises to practice what they've learned in the theory, and then after that, the rest of their time is they're photographing all their projects. So photography in the world of forensics and the world of crime scene investigation is probably 80% of the work, because not only are you photographing evidence at crime scenes, but you're photographing every step of your investigation as well. Every time you pick something up and examine it, you have to take a picture of it. And every time you find a fingerprint on it, let's say, you're taking a photograph of that. So photography is essential. And we have to make sure when we do our training that when they leave here, they really know what they're doing and can troubleshoot. If you're photographers, you know half of photography is troubleshooting a problem that you come across. So try to have these students think outside the box when they experience a little bit of a conundrum in their setup, because photography at crime scenes, there's usually no air conditioning, there's no hydro, there's no lighting, and those are just a few of the things that we have to contend with. There's no average brightness scene. Everything's either burnt out and black, or really bright out in the snow in a blizzard outside at a crime scene. So all those kinds of exposure problems we have to contend with as well. So generally speaking, these FIOs are police officers, and how many years experience as police officers they get under their belt before they can become a forensic identification officer is really a judgment call based on their previous education, previous training. Sometimes it comes down to we need somebody really bad, and we'll bring we'll bring you in. When I worked in Toronto, we'd like to see officers with that 5 to 7 years experience out on the street before applying for such a position, just because that way they get used to actually attending crime scenes, even though they're not examining them. They know what a crime scene looks like. Um, they won't step on evidence not knowing it's evidence, for example. I can still remember taking people through crime scenes and they'd step on a crack pipe, let's say, and not even realize that that was a crack pipe, and then they just stepped on it. Simple things like that. But that was then, and this is now, and finding personnel to do this kind of work is hard. It's hard work, and people know it's hard work, and the applications are slim. So some services have been accepting people with just maybe 2 years street experience. Um, they There's also a swing now towards hiring civilians, and that just means they might have just graduated from a forensics program of some sort from university. Windsor has a forensics program. U of T has one. Laurentian has one. Um, UOIT, or are they still called UOIT? They have a forensic program as well. And so if you are in that kind of a position and you're thinking about getting into working in forensics with a police service, You can. They're starting to hire them. They're looking for a post-secondary education with some kind of relevancy. So if you have a biology degree, chemistry degree, maybe you have an anthropology degree, anything that could be applied to the field they'd be interested in. They, if you don't have an education at that, well, it doesn't stop you from applying. It's just that you'd be at the bottom of the list. They're going to take people who have that post-secondary education first before anyone else. And then once they hire you, if you're not a police officer already, the police service decides, depending on their policies, if they are going to swear you in as a special constable. That gives you the same authorities as a regular police officer, but only when you're at your workplace. And others aren't swearing you in at all and are leaving you as a civilian. And there's legality behind both roles. You can do more if you're a sworn special constable than you can as a civilian when it comes to seizing evidence, for example, and doing searches and so forth. All right, so no matter what your background is, if you get hired, even if you've already had training somewhere else, it doesn't matter. You still have to go through the official government accredited training. So you could have been a professional photographer for 25 years. It doesn't matter. You have to come for this training and get the stamp of approval from the government of Ontario. And then once you get your certification, you have to recertify every 3 years. And right now, the recertification is just a very long multiple choice exam. We're working on possibly getting a proficiency test on the go. We're trying to put that together, but right now it's just a multiple choice exam every 3 years. I also give presentations to students at the University of Toronto, and they're in a forensics program there, and it always shocked me that more than half of those students don't even know what the word forensic means. So that's why I have this slide here, what forensic actually means. Some people think it means I'm working on things really small. No, it just means you're doing something for legal purposes that you're going to be bringing to court. Plain and simple, it has to do with following the rules of law and as far as gathering your evidence, following certain standards, and testifying in court to what you've done. And so you have forensic identification officers. This means we're identification officers, which means one of our main roles is looking at fingerprints and identifying people. And we bring those reports to court. But you also have forensic pathologists, those that do the autopsies. You have forensic anthropologists who will testify to recovering human remains, let's say. You might even have a forensic accountant who the police have used to prove a case of fraud or something like that. So whenever you see the title forensic, that just means they're doing it for legal purposes and for bringing a report to court and testifying as an expert, more than likely. So you have to use, part of the training is to use the proper equipment and techniques while you're recording your crime scenes and your evidence. There's rules to follow under the Canada Evidence Act. You have to prove the chain of continuity, which means what happened to this gun, let's say, at a shooting scene from the time you photographed it and picked it up to the time you're showing it to the judge and jury in the court. Where has it been all that time? You have to be able to track those things. And that also includes your photographs. We have to be able to say, when I took this photograph, where did that digital image go? Well, it went onto my memory card, and what is the procedure after that? Am I allowed to take my memory card home? Does it have to stay in the possession of the police service? What kind of system is in place when I transfer my photos into a server? Who can access it? Who has the authority to access these photos? Who can print them? Who can view them, etc.? Am I allowed to delete my memory card after I take my photos, or do I have to get a whole new card for my next crime scene? And that might seem like a silly thing to say, but way back when you go back 25 years when digital photography was new to the profession, many services, particularly in the United States, they treated memory cards like film. So you did a job, everything was on the memory card. They took the card out of the camera and they sealed it as their evidence and bought a new card for their next job. So you can imagine that can get pretty expensive over a length of time. And back then, your largest card was 1 gigabyte, and it cost just as much as it is now for a 64 gigabyte card. I remember my first card I got, I think it was in K instead of gigs. So you could actually get pretty expensive. So fortunately, the system has come around and said, no, that's okay. You can transfer your photos from your card and just keep reusing your card, format your card and keep using it. So the procedures, if you will, we'll call them procedures, the methods we follow for forensic photography are guided by old documents from a group formerly known as SWIGIT, the Scientific Working Group on Imaging and Technology. They were originally funded by the FBI. Their funding was cut and they were discontinued, and all of their documents that they published are now in the possession of a group called the Organization of Scientific Area Committees. And that's down in the United States. And their funding now comes through the National Institute of Justice and also through the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And so I'm not going to call it a problem, but the USA is a very large country with 50 states, and it's almost like 50 different countries. Every state wants to have their own rules and ways of doing things. And this scientific committee, it's endeavoring to try to get a standard from coast to coast across the states. We're lucky in Canada because we can only get the training in 2 different places and we train the same way. So a forensic identification officer in Vancouver does things the same as another one in Nova Scotia, does the same as someone else in Ontario. So we really have our act together here in Canada, if I can boast. And in my opinion, our system is much better than most systems that are down in the United States. So part of the rules where they say this is what you should be doing through these committees is you should be using a digital camera that isn't a point and shoot. We want to have something where we can change the lenses. We want to be able to have an off-camera flash. We typically shoot in RAW because we want to be able to show the integrity of the images. So if a change is made, it produces that XMP file, for example. It's harder to show integrity of an image if we're shooting in JPEGs. So if we can, we like to shoot in RAW just for that purpose alone. It's not anything to do with editing purposes. It's simply for proving that nothing has been altered in that image. We have a variety of lenses that we use. The macro lens for impression photography, for our fingerprints, for our footwear impressions, tool marks, tire marks, things like that. And then we have a general zoom lens that we use for our general crime scene photography. We always have to have an off-camera flash. I always say in class, as soon as you attach that expensive flash onto the hot shoe of the camera, you've just turned that into an expensive point and shoot camera. So we never use the flash directly on the hot shoe. We always hold it in our left hand to control where the light's coming from, and that flash is either wireless or it's with a cord, depending on the model and make of the camera. The other advantage of having an off-camera flash is when we do night photography. Believe it or not, crime happens at night, and we need to be able to do something at that scene outside instead of claiming overtime and waiting for the sun to come up. So we teach how to walk and paint with the flash. I don't know if anybody has experience in doing that. Basically, you walk around your scene using a little bit of math, and you fire the flash manually around your scene to light it up from different directions while the shutter's back in bulb while the camera sits on the tripod. Speaking of tripods, we all need to have tripods because we're using slow shutter speeds in a lot of these low light situations. And we'll use a wireless remote shutter system. And then one of the big things we always have to keep in mind in forensic photography is perspective. So we just can't be willy-nilly zooming in and out on our zoom lens, taking pictures as we walk around the crime scene. We have to go to the judge and jury and say, here's a photo. This is exactly the way it looked when I was there and took the picture. So on full frame cameras, you experienced photographers know, on full frame cameras, that's going to sit around 50 millimeters. So we try to shoot everything at 50 millimeters as much as we can. Of course, there are times where 50 millimeters is just too tight of a field of view to show a whole crime scene. So we will use something like 24 to try to get a room in one shot. But there's a chance that that can be challenged in court and we could lose that photo. So what we'll do is we'll take that wide angle shot and then we follow up with 50 millimeter shots as a backup so that we can still show proper distance between, let's say, furniture in the room, objects in the room, the victim, if he's deceased, the body on the floor, etc. Because as you know, if you're an experienced photographer, you can change that focal length, and if you also change your shooting position, you can really expand the distance between foreground and background or compress them. And you don't want to do that in court and mislead anybody, because I can make a gun look a foot away from a deceased on the floor or 2 feet away from the floor, for example. So sometimes that makes a huge difference. And not only do we have to be aware of the focal length we're using, we also have to be aware of the size of the print we're bringing to court. It's the two things together that show true perspective. So basically, if you shoot at 50 and print an 8x10 and hold that about 15 inches from your face, that photograph would be, if you imagine the photograph to be transparent, it should be an overlay right on top of the scene that you just photographed. And if you forgot to do that, well, of course, mom always warned you, you'd have to use math in your life one day. So we have mathematical formulas that if we forgot, we shot it at 70, let's say, instead of 50, we can do the formula to change the size of the print or change the distance that we hold it away from our face to get that true perspective back again. We also, in the training, address crop factor. Not every police service uses full frame cameras. Some of them still use crop sensors. Nikon D7200, for example. When I was in Toronto, we actually used Olympus cameras for a while, and they had a crop factor of 2. So we teach what that means, the artificial magnification effect that you get when you make a print, as well as cropping off the field of view through your viewfinder, and how that affects how slow can you go with your shutter speed before you need to bring the tripod out to keep things steady, because that also affects that. So this is from the days when I used to do a little bit of teaching at the Mohawk Brantford campus. This is what the Brantford campus used to look like, and here's an example of what I mean by perspective. So the lamppost that you see at the right side of the screen of both photos is the exact same light post. So you can see the repercussions. If this was a real case and say someone was leaning against that light post having a cigarette on a break and testifies that they saw Billy stab Joey at the doors to the college there. I know it was Joey, I could see him clear as day. And the officer who went to the scene produced to the court the photograph that you see on the left. Could you can you tell that the judge and jury might not believe that witness now? The witness being completely honest, but you show that photo on the left, and now no one believes that witness. So that's just one of the things that can happen if you don't keep track of what you're doing and you don't keep track of the focal length that you're using. So here's an example here. I've taken a photograph of the front of the college. I brought it outside and I hold it that magic 15 inches away, and you can see the size of everything in the photograph is the same as the actual size of the college. So that's what I'm getting at there. Depth of field is huge in forensic photography. We typically never go more wide open than f8. We have the phrase f8 is great and f11 is heaven. So we never are allowed to have a shallow depth of field to blur out backgrounds or foregrounds, because we're just opening ourselves up by defense lawyers to say we're deliberately hiding something. So everything has to be full, frank, fair, and transparent. So we're shooting at f8, 11, 16, 22. Fingerprints will be shot at 16, 22, and 32 because that's macro photography, and you have to be careful with your depth of field when your lens is only a couple inches away from your fingerprint. And so here's part of the painting that I was talking about earlier. So this is on the college property here. We have an area set aside as a memorial to officers who were killed on duty. It's called the Path of Honor. And it's lined with trees. Every tree planted in the park represents an officer who's been killed. So people will go there and reflect. But anyways, this is the technique where it's nighttime, and I've walked down outside each row of trees on the left and right, and every 4 paces, I fired the flash off manually. And the camera's way back on a tripod with the shutter left open and bulb. So I fired the flash 4 paces at a time, and that distance is about, I think it's about 100 feet. Go down the left, go down the right, come back to the camera, close the shutter, and that's the effect that you get. So you nicely light up the scene without having to wait for the sun to come up. Now you can see, because of how long it took to do that, probably at least 3 minutes, that the sky has become lighter than it should have been. In reality, the sky was quite black. So I'd have to explain that to the court, that the effect of enhancing the scene with this technique actually makes the sky look brighter than it actually was. Now, for some reason, I was concerned about that. I can switch to a different technique where this time I walked down the left side of the trees and the right side of the trees with a bright spotlight. And walking was not quite accurate. I actually jogged, and because that spotlight's pretty bright. So trial and error, which is a great thing with digital cameras. I pick an aperture that I think that'll work. After years of experience, you kind of get to know which one it is. And you jog down, holding that spotlight at a 45-degree angle, downwards of that path, down the left and down the right, and come back. And because that was a lot quicker, the sky remained dark. That's sweeping left and right with a spotlight standing in one position to illuminate a park. And then other techniques are using just a slow shutter speed in rain or snow to make the rain or snow not even be recorded. And that turns the left scene into what we look like. We can actually see what we're looking at on the right there. So it's also an obligation on us to photograph the scene the way we see it before we do enhancement techniques like this. So if the way so it's hard to do, especially if you have a crime scene in the middle of nowhere with no ambient lighting, no street lights or anything like that. You really cannot recreate how dark it was at the time the crime was committed for a variety of reasons. It's because how long was the person standing in the dark when they saw what they say they saw? And are they going to see the same thing? Let's say they stood in the dark for 20 minutes before they saw this crime take place. If I stand in the dark for 20 minutes, am I guaranteed to see the same thing as that person did after 20 minutes? Probably not. So that's a problem. If we have some kind of lighting like street lights, we can recreate that no problem at all. The problem is when there's no lighting at all, and a lot of times we have that long debate in court about how impossible it is to accurately reflect how dark a scene is when the scene has no lighting whatsoever. So into macro photography, we use a macro lens, of course, so we don't have distortions. Get right in there, fill the frame with every fingerprint that we find. We include a scale so we can calibrate it to enter into our AFIS terminal. In case you don't know what AFIS is, that stands for Automated Fingerprint Identification System. So the photographs go into there, and that's where you see on TV where the fingerprints flash, and all of a sudden, bing, 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 we have a match. That doesn't actually work that way. The computer system is designed to find possible matches, and a human actually goes and physically compares them to find if this print belongs or doesn't belong to a particular suspect. You need a camera that can provide a minimum of 1,000 pixels per inch resolution to qualify as a camera capable of recording fingerprints. Yeah, nowadays, that's pretty easy. The resolution of modern cameras is pretty good. So there's an example of a footwear impression. And then we get into what if our surfaces aren't flat? Sometimes they're curved. We have bottles, we have glasses and cups. So we get into tricks of the trade. Here's one of them. Normally a person would be, this is, in case you didn't know, this is the end of a handle of a flashlight. And so the yellow represents the fingerprint residue, and it's quite tempting to have the lens pointing straight down and let that focus point hit the top of the flashlight handle, and you would say, oh, this is pretty deep for depth of field. I'll use f22 or f32. And when you do that, you still see parts of the fingerprint are out of the depth of field and out of focus. So the trick of the trade is, instead of focusing on the top, you deliberately focus halfway down the depth of the impression. So the trick is let the focus point focus on the top of the flashlight handle, and then move your face towards your object until you see the apex of the curve go fuzzy, and then shoot at f32. And that creates an acceptable depth of field and focus for the whole impression. So this is what I'm talking about here. So the image on the left is what I would see through my viewfinder. You can see the shoulders on the left and right are in focus. So I know I've pushed my face in close enough, and then using f32, you get the image on the right, where the whole print is an acceptable focus. Part of the training is also developing fingerprints through chemical means and then photographing that. So we have what are called forensic light sources of different wavelengths. We have lasers. So the image on the left is me holding a forensic light source to excite the chemical to cause it to fluoresce. And then through a variety of filters, we get the result that you see on the right there. Excuse me, I just have to cough for a second. Sorry about that. This is an example. This is an actual crime scene photo from a homicide that I investigated many, many years ago. And that bright blue patch that you see on the carpeting there is a reaction of blood with a chemical called Blue Star. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It reacts with the hemoglobin of blood, causes a chemical reaction that produces light. So you turn the lights off in the room and you spray this chemical in the room, and if there's blood there, you'll get a reaction. It's a slight glow, and then you take about a 30-second or 1 minute long exposure in the dark to record the glowing stain. Then you turn the lights on in the room, and without moving your camera and tripod, you take another photograph of that same location. And then in Photoshop, you combine the two, And now we can see where on the carpeting that we found that stain. The method of crime scene photography, got to have a method. We like to go chronological order so we don't confuse anybody as they're looking through a stack of photos about where we were and where we found everything that we found. And the process is called overall, mid-range, close-up, and then we add a scale and we do a close-up with scale. So you have to be able to tell a logical story of your photographic investigation. Usually you end up telling the story of the events of your investigation. If you're lucky, sometimes the side effect is you've also just happened to have photographed the way the crime actually happened. But that's not always the case. But you'll always end up photographing the sequence of events of your crime scene investigation. And again, we like to use 50 as much as we can. If we have to use a wide angle, so be it, but we have to make sure we explain to the court that we used a wide angle and the effects that that causes. So here's an example of a simple bank robbery. This is taken at 24 millimeters, so the bank actually looks larger than it actually is. So I'd have to explain that to the judge and jury. This is just to show you the layout of the bank. The teller's wicket is actually much closer than in real life. And then eventually you get to this scene where this is human perspective. This is where it's really important because this is where the teller was standing. So I have to have the camera lens at the same height as the teller's eyes, pointing towards where the teller was looking, and have it at 50, and then print that 8x10 to get true perspective. So when the teller says they saw someone doing, let's say, writing the hold-up note at that little service desk in the middle, everyone's going to believe the teller. Yeah, I can tell that they'd be able to see that was going on. And if the teller said, well, I saw them go out and then turn left down the street, it's quite easy, it's quite believable that that was the case because of the way the photo was taken as well. So that's just the overall mid-range close-up with scale is coming up here. So we're still in the bank. This isn't a real bank, by the way. This is a fake bank that we have on our property here at the college for training purposes. So here's an overall shot showing a knife and a note at the teller's wicket. And let's just say we just want to concentrate on the knife. So we'll get, this is called a mid-range. We still see the knife and the note. And then we go right down to the knife and then get in with the scale there. And then if we wanted to photograph the note, we'd go all the way back to that original place where we see both the knife and the note and then go in concentrating on the note instead. Other techniques that I teach on our training courses are photographing laser trajectories. And everyone always has fun. People just enjoy doing that one. So we have realistic mannequins that we use here. So I'm shooting the green laser at, his name is Victor. And then Victor's trying to shoot back at me with his red laser. So we do that. And the way we do that, by the way, is we turn on the laser pointers and then we walk along the beam with a white card in the dark. So because we're moving, we're not recorded, but the beam is nice and bright on the white card, so it records that laser beam. And then we turn the lights on and photograph the room without moving the camera. And then we use Photoshop to combine the two photos. So you get a laser beam in a well-lit room. There's another example of showing a bullet trajectory with a laser beam going through a car. And then this is a daylight scenario with 3 different bullet trajectories going into this Volkswagen here. And I'm not going to give away how that one's done. So I already told you how the indoor ones were done. We turn off the lights, walk with a white card, turn on the lights, and take another photo. But that's indoors. So if it's outdoors and the sun is shining, I can't turn off the sun. So I'll let you wonder how we do this kind of photo. That'll be a little quiz for you on the presentation. How is it that we accomplish recording a laser beam in daytime conditions? We also get into infrared photography. Infrared is great for enhancing blood stains on clothing, and that's what an example is here. So it's hard to see the blood on the black t-shirt and the photograph on the left, but as soon as you use an infrared camera, the cotton actually reflects infrared, so it becomes bright. Blood slightly absorbs infrared energy, so it stays pretty dark. So now you have more contrast and you can see more of the blood stain. And that is my presentation there. My email is right smack in the middle there and my phone number. So if you have any questions you want to ask, feel free to call me or email me, and I'll do my best to get back to you. We'll see if anybody's figured out how I did that daytime laser trajectory on the Volkswagen.
So we have Jocelyn asking about for you to chat a little bit about how AI now is involved.
Oh, we say no to AI. So,
Okay.
um, AI hasn't entered our world just yet, and I hope it never does, to be honest. I'm of that generation that watched this whole thing with Skynet, and it scares me. So, there are, I've been reading articles where I think, and I could be wrong, is helping laboratories with the DNA profiling, but I could be wrong about that. Um, I know up here in Canada for sure, AI hasn't entered the world of forensics yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Uh, I put in a little bit of a question here. Did you use some sort of a spray mist for the outdoor laser?
Oh, that's a good guess, but no, we don't use foggers, even though we could. And that's because we don't want to introduce any substance into our crime scene that can contaminate. So we didn't use any kind of smoke or fog for that, but it's a good guess. Anybody
So
else have a guess?
Gerald says, I'm guessing extremely dark glass.
Oh, you're getting there. You're getting there. Very, very close.
Is it glasses you wear?
No, but you're so close. If you
Okay,
give up, I'll let you know.
off topic a bit, but David's asking, do you use drones at all?
Yes, not on our training courses specifically. Drone training is usually provided by the vendor who sells the drone to the police service. So drones are used for aerial photography of large-scale crime scenes. We don't provide that training here because it's a lot of red tape we have to go through. Because when you fly a drone for business purposes, you now need your ground school pilot's license, and you have to log in flight plans with your local airport, and it's too much for the government to want to get involved with. So what happens instead is the people who sell the drone to the police service, they provide their own training to them. Maybe one day we'll be doing it, but right now we're not.
Okay, thank you. We have another possible answer for your daylight laser, and that is Jocelyn again. Do you shade the light so the laser is visible?
No,
Oh,
no.
come on.
One thing I'll give you is I still walk the beam with a card. So that's half of the equation.
Shadow?
So even though I've walked the beam with the card, you don't see me, and it's daylight.
So Chris is saying, do you use a density filter on the camera?
Bingo. That's exactly what you do. So we use neutral density filters, up to 13 stops worth of neutral density filter. because that's how bright a summer day at noon is, and that's when I was doing this. I forget how many stops I needed for that one. It wasn't the full 13. I think it was about eight stops around that. And so that's how I did it. So what I did it was I just by experiment adjusted. I had a variable neutral density filter, and I just twisted that neutral density filter until I got an exposure, a good exposure of the car with a 30-second exposure. And then what I would do is I would take that photograph, and then that gave me 30 seconds to walk the beam with the card. And so when the shutter closed after 30 seconds, instantly in camera, you see the laser beam and the car in daylight. And I did that 3 times for 3 beams and combined all 3 photos in Photoshop to see all 3 beams at once on the car. So you got it. Congratulations.
We have another question here. Do you use special infrared camera or filter?
We use specialized infrared filters, yes. And what we've done is you can buy an infrared camera. Fuji makes them, but they only sell to police services. They don't sell to the general public, from what I've been told. Another way to do it that's much more cost effective is you take any SLR, any digital SLR that has live view capability, and you send it to a company that removes the hot mirror off of the sensor and makes that SLR now a full spectrum sensor. So that's what I've done here. So I have several cameras that have been altered to make them full spectrum cameras. So now the sensor, instead of just seeing the visible light between 400 and 700 nanometers, now we can see down to 350-ish up to 1200 nanometers. So we can see UV and we can see IR. So we use UV filters and IR filters to photograph our evidence for blood or altered documents or a whole plethora of different things.
I'm not sure if there's somebody in the group here that has already converted one camera to infrared. I don't know if there is, but I know that in a previous presentations, somebody was playing around with that idea and got some quotes on converting the way you suggest the camera to infrared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a company called, I used a company called Life Pixel in Seattle, Washington,
Mhm.
and they charge $300 US to convert an SLR to full spectrum. It's less money if you want just IR, but I figure if I'm spending it, let's go full spectrum because then I can also teach UV photography. So it's $300 for a full frame sensor, and it's about $275 for a crop sensor.
Okay. I think somebody was going to say something.
That was me, George. Yeah, I've been looking at that, but I just brought a filter for the time being, just to put it on front of my camera. But uh, as you say, I've been looking, and there's only 2 places I've found, and they're both in the States.
Yeah, I think there's one in Quebec. I can't remember the name of them though,
Hmm.
unfortunately. There was a place in Quebec, and then there was another place in the US called Max Max. They're down the turnpike somewhere. I can't remember which state they're in, but I ended up using Life Pixel. And
Yeah.
they also, when you have Life Pixel do it, they also give you some um, templates to load into Photoshop, so you can have certain profiles assigned to your photos, your infrared photos. So if you're interested in that kind of thing. Um, yeah, so if you haven't converted your camera and you're putting an infrared filter on the front, it will result to get a good infrared image. You would have really long shutter speeds. You'd have to probably do a couple minutes to get something that's truly infrared, because that mirror is designed to block infrared. It doesn't block it completely, which allows you to actually get something. But if you convert that camera, it's a world of difference. Oh, it's the difference between night and day, literally. Some of the old Nikon cameras can see infrared off the shelf. For instance, the D70, the old D70, half of their production line could see infrared. So I happened to have one, and I went down to a infrared course to learn more about it, and I compared that against a converted camera, and the difference was between night and day still. So if you're serious about infrared photography, you really should get a converted camera.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Gerald asking a question here. Um, on CSI, we see them searching a room with very low lights on and use a small flashlight. Is that real?
Yes, it is. So we used to have the lights used to be much bigger and bulky, but now with the advancement of LED technology and lithium-ion batteries, we can get forensic lights that are about the size of a three-cell mag light, and we have different wavelengths. And so we have a blue light that's 450 nanometers, looks just like a flashlight, and we use that to find body fluids. We can look for blood, we can look for saliva, we can look for urine, and that's so blue is the magic wavelength to find body fluids. And then we also will re-examine the scene with a green forensic light source, because green can reveal evidence that you didn't know was there. And it's not necessarily going to be a body fluid, because blue does a much better job, but you might see something like lipstick on a glass that a lady took a drink from a glass at the crime scene, and you couldn't tell there was anything on the glass, and then you throw the green light on, there's a lip print and lipstick there all of a sudden, for example. Some people's fingerprints naturally fluoresce when you put a blue light on them or a green light on them. So we can, so before we bring out the fingerprint brushes and powders or any kind of chemicals, we'll use lights, and many times we can find just naturally fluorescent fingerprints in the scene without having to treat them with any kind of chemical.
Yeah, that's
Yep, so
pretty cool.
that part is real.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question because obviously everybody watches CSI and so forth. Um, they use something called luminol to detect blood.
Yeah.
Is that similar to the compound you're using?
Yeah, luminol and the blue star in my example are the same basic chemical. Blue star, it comes in tablet form. It's kind of pre-mixed, if you would like. It's just a couple of tablets that you throw in some distilled water, whereas luminol you have to make from scratch,
Hmm.
mixing a powder called luminol with a couple of other chemicals. In my opinion, actually, luminol works a little better. It's just more time consuming to make. Yes, but luminol is part of our repertoire here for looking for blood. And it does the same thing. It reacts with the hemoglobin and causes a chemical reaction that creates light to photograph.
I have to ask one more question. Because when I'm teaching some of my students and the question comes up as to what is that circle with a line through it on top of the camera, and I tell them that's the focal plane indicator, and they say, why would you even need to know that? And I tell them because if you know the distance from the focal plane to the subject you're shooting, what it could be forensics, it could be entomology, it could be any kind of scientific thing. But if you know that distance from the focal plane to the subject and the focal length of the lens, then somebody at the other end, when they receive the photograph, they can apply a formula and know the actual size of the original object that was photographed.
Yeah, we don't on our training we don't do the photogrammetry formulations or anything like that. So we tell our students, if you don't want to learn formulas and you don't want to do math, just use 50 and print an 8 by 10, and you'll be fine. So I think the formula we have is viewing distance equals the focal length times the enlargement factor of the sensor.
Hmm.
So all you have to do really is read the metadata of the photo, and then use that formula because the metadata will show you what focal length you used, and then you'll know also what camera you used and the size of the sensor. So you have two of the three elements of that formula, and you can figure out the rest.
Wow, metadata saves the day.
That's right. Yeah. So you don't. So why I use that symbol for myself is that creates the nodal point for panorama photography.
Mhm.
So I can get a special pan head for my tripod and have less distortion spinning that, panning that camera left to right if I know where the nodal point on the camera is.
So that means that if you're using a 50 millimeter for a pan, then you measure 50 millimeters from that point outwards, and that's the nodal point, and that's where you put the pivot for the tripod.
Um, yeah, or you can just make sure that that symbol is dead center of your pan head, and so
Hmm.
it actually spins on one single point as you're spinning.
Okay.
So that's the way I've been doing it, and I don't know now that you mention it. If I'm doing it your way, I have to compare to see if there's a difference between that way and my way, because it's doing it otherwise because the tripod mount is never at the same depth as that symbol. And so there's an offset of that sensor swinging around as you pan. So I have a bracket that I slide forward or backward so the nodal point's on the pivot point. So that's the way I've been doing it.
Do they often get a lot of resistance in court about using photographs? Because these days, obviously, most people feel that photographs can be manipulated so easily. And so it would be up to your guys to be able to prove that it hasn't gone astray and been manipulated somehow.
Yeah, when police services first switched from film to digital, which was around 2004, and I was one of them. I had a Contax camera with a Carl Zeiss lens, and I loved that camera. Amazing photographs from that camera. Manual focus. It was cumbersome, but it was an amazing camera. And when it was announced we were switching to digital, me and a lot of other guys were saying, "You're going to have to take this camera from my cold dead hands," because we were scared of exactly that. We're going to be accused of digitally manipulating our crime scene photos, and so there was a knee-jerk reaction. And so fortunately, there's an organization based in the United States called the International Association for Identification, and they did a publication saying, hey, this is just a transition in technology. Instead of being frightened by it, we should be embracing it. And all we have to do is explain to court the technology and do things that shows we haven't manipulated the image, such as shooting in RAW, for example. Having always making sure the metadata is available that shows the correct date and time and the photographer's name, and it shows the camera information, the lens information, and we also have to prove that chain of continuity. Okay, I took the photograph, the card, I went back to my office. We have a computer that I put the card in, it transfers to a secure server. The server locks the images in. If someone tries to view that photo, even, it's logged about which computer was used and by whom, because whoever logged in would be to view that photo would be recorded. If somebody tried to print that image, that kind of thing would also be happening, and we disclose that to court if anything like that happening. And that's why you don't see in Canada things that you see in the States where they'll show the mugshot of a celebrity on the front page of a newspaper for something silly that they've done. Yeah, in Canada, you can't do that because those photographs are locked in the server, and someone surreptitiously tried to get a copy to send to the newspaper. They're going to be caught and they're going to lose their job. So we do really good work up here on this side of the border in locking down our evidence to prevent manipulation and tampering.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rob. I'm just going to put it out there. Does anybody else have any other questions at all for Rob? I'm going to say good evening to some people I didn't say good evening to earlier. I noticed that Terry Gilman, who's going to be doing the Madagascar talk, was here, or probably is still here, and I'd like to welcome her to the chat because we'll be talking to her later this month. Any other questions? Anything? Anybody? Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, Rob, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here. It's been
Thank you.
terrific. I've learned a lot, so it just goes
Oh,
to
well,
show
that's
you.
good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how interested are people bored when I talk about this stuff or what. I hope everyone enjoyed. I enjoyed sharing everything with you.
Yeah. No, it was very good, very interesting. It's good to just see the other side of how it works. As you say, we see all this stuff on TV and you're never quite sure if it's true or not. But it's good to have someone who actually works on the field, and your presentation was excellent.
Well, thank you very much. In case you're wondering, the worst photography demonstration I've ever seen on television is the original Dexter series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He never used the camera the right way once in that entire series. He's taking crime scene shots with a ring flash as one for one thing. But anyways, I digress.
Okay, so
Thank
we've
you
had a
very
few
much,
people.
Rob. I appreciate your doing that presentation.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rob. I'm going to just cut from there, and we're going to go to, well, that was Rob winding up. And,
No, I'm still here.
oh, I know. Um there I am. So thank you again, Rob. That was a terrific presentation. I really liked it. Now, if you were on YouTube, if you could like it and subscribe, because there will be more presentations coming on. I know that in the future, I'm looking at somebody coming in with a drone presentation who's not only, he was an amateur drone flyer, for which you don't need a license, but then he got his pilot's license for drones so he could fly the heavier drones. And that'll be an interesting presentation, is how you can get started in using drones. And then, of course, if you want to go a little bit further, how to maneuver taking the test and all that, because it's basically a pilot's license that you have to get. And then there's also going to be a presentation, hopefully, because I'm looking into it, on scuba photography. Um, and that's from an Ontario perspective. I know that Chris Atkins will be coming on because he's doing some scuba diving right now, or deep sea diving, looking for a galleon in the Mediterranean, a pirate galleon, and he'll be putting on a little bit of a presentation on the challenges of that and the equipment required to do that. So that'll be an interesting presentation. But those are still in the wings, so we'll see what happens. I would like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and we're finishing pretty well on time. We're only 5 minutes over. So, again, thank you for attending. I appreciate it. Please, if you get a chance, go to the YouTube version, because this will be on YouTube, so you can go through it again, look at it again, and you're welcome to do that. I don't think that, is that okay with you, Rob?
Oh, perfectly fine.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you very much. And again, one of the things I like you to do is give us a like, the old thumbs up, and please subscribe. So with that, I'm going to say good night to everybody. Thank you for attending, and it's been a pleasure. Good night. Yeah, you're welcome.